Hello everyone, welcome back. As you can imagine, part 2 of Shoe0nhead series, The Fall of the Democrats. Now, for those that haven't seen my previous video, I highly recommend you go check it out, catch you up so to speak, and see if some of the points I made in the previous video become relevant in this one. I definitely appreciate the considerable amount of recommendations to go ahead and check this video out, and hopefully we can have that kind of communication in the future. For those that have been appreciating the content, please consider subscribing as it helps a lot. Not much to say before we get into this one, so without further ado, let's get into it.
Election night in America, one of the most consequential elections in recent history.
Donald Trump has won the presidential election in Kentucky.
Florida, Alabama, Tennessee, and Oklahoma. Missouri will go to Donald Trump.
It's clear now that Donald Trump has picked up key support among Hispanic voters, despite all the things that he said.
Donald Trump will win the state of North Carolina.
That the state of Georgia will go to former President Donald Trump.
The evening was getting increasingly somber as people realized what this map is looking like.
CNN projects that Donald Trump will win the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Kamala Harris is not winning.
So you won't hear from the vice president tonight?
News Decision Desk can now officially project that Donald Trump will become the 47th president of the United States.
Do you really think that the Democratic Party is fighting for you? The overwhelming answer is no.
Make it fancy.
Well. What have we learned? Nothing, apparently.
Nope.
I regret to inform you, everything I predicted about the election in my last video came true, and more. Men did overwhelmingly turn out for Trump, especially young men. But I was wrong about one thing. Young men weren't the only ones who came out in droves for Trump. Nearly everyone did. The madman took everything, every swing state, Pennsylvania, Georgia, my home state, New York, was closer to flipping red than Florida was to flipping blue. Turns out Dick Cheney as Brat wasn't the best message to win over voters. Dems did so bad it really had me thinking, damn, did we steal that election?
Well, what you kind of see also is the narrative that like Donald Trump is like brainwashing everybody and his ethics, policies, and stuff like that. Here's the thing. The left-wing news outlets control the predominant platform of media in general. Like I've said in the previous video, you got like Fox on the other side. So you can't really take the concept of brainwashing and the idea of like delusion and stuff like that. Remember how we talked about the essence of intelligence in reference to voting? Can't really use that. Maybe there's something more to it. Maybe there's an essence of being wrong.
So what happened here? How did it go so wrong? Is it too late for the Democratic Party, or can they turn this around? Will the Democrats learn from this, or will they double down and get worse? In this video, I'm going to go through all the excuses and the copes the Democrats and the broader left are coming up with to avoid accountability. Read some silly tweets, watch some silly news clips, and even give the Democratic Party some advice on how to win 2028. Don't worry, Republicans watching this. They won't listen. Maybe in 2050, under the barren Trump monarchy, someone might come to their senses, but not anytime soon. If you only watched or read most mainstream liberal news, it really seemed like Kamala had this in the bag, which is why you should try to get your news from a variety of different sources. That reminds me, before we dive into this election dissection, let's give a quick shout out to today's sponsor, a sponsor I've been working with for over 4 years now, Ground News. Ground News is a website and an app that gives readers an easy and transparent way to read the news all across the political spectrum. Every story comes with a quick visual breakdown that helps you understand the full story and makes sure you're getting both sides. One of my favorite features of Ground News is the blind spot feature, which shows you what news stories have been covered by one side of the political spectrum and ignored by the other. For example, here is a story about how Bernie Sanders is open to working with Trump on capping credit card interests, and there's 23 sources on it, and 89% are right-wing. No left-wing sources have covered the story. And this story about how 2 women have told the ethics panel that Matt Gaetz paid them for sex, 31 sources 61% of them left-wing. You can even see who owns these political outlets. Ground News also makes it really easy and fun to compare headlines to see how ownership or political bias can affect the framing of a story. For example, this story about how a man was arrested after allegedly a stabbing spree in Manhattan that left 2 dead and 1 injured. This left-wing outlet says, man arrested after alleged stabbing spree in Manhattan that left 2 dead, 1 injured. This right-wing outlet says, 2 dead, 1 critically injured in Manhattan as knife-wielding maniac launches unprovoked
Very low
savage
factuality.
spree. I have been using Ground News since 2021 and I am just obsessed with this app. It is a great and easy way to stay informed, plus it really helps me see how both sides frame the same story so differently. Best of all, for Black Friday, I am offering 50% off their Vantage plan, which is the plan I use to access all their amazing features. This is their biggest discount of the year, so go to ground.news/shoe, use the QR code here on the screen, or use the link in the video description down below and subscribe today for only $4.16 repeating per month. I personally think what they're doing is very important because it helps approach the news in a more balanced and transparent way, and I feel like we really need that nowadays. So thank you, Ground News, for sponsoring this video, and thank you, the viewer, for not skipping the ad. Right? And now let's get back to this election dissection, shall we?
There's no point in saying good morning, because it certainly is not one.
From blaming the American people to blaming Joe Rogan, the Democrats and the media are having a hard time coping with their loss, and I don't blame them. It was a pretty big loss. Embarrassing, quite frankly. Donald Trump overperformed in nearly every state, with basically every demographic, and the entire country seems to be shifting more red. Everyone was so sure dangerous, devious, dastardly Donald would never make his way back into the White House to steal democracy. And he did it. With democracy. Anyway, I got a lot of comments on my last video like, wait, you're left-wing and you hate the Democrats? Yeah, man, that's a pretty common thing. If you were shocked that I'm left-wing, maybe that's a sign you need to take a step back and evaluate some of the preconceived stereotypes you have of people. Not all of us are crazy blue-haired socialists, no.
I think there's often a lot more discourse on the left, isn't there? Because you have the agreeable radical left as known by many, and that's kind of a bottomless pit because the more you allow, the more it'll continue. And so I feel like that really splits apart left-wing politics on grand scale. So you'll have like your historical Democrats who stood by the concepts of democracy for a long-standing period of time. And then you have these more radical types, and it's not a very little amount. It really splits the party apart. And I know that we see representations on both sides, and when you go to the polls, it's yes or no, it's left or right. There's no in between when it comes down to the big choice. And what sucks is like whatever decision you choose, guess what? You are all the way on that side of the representation, despite the stigmas involved and the stigmas that you probably don't even want to accept. But because here you are casting this vote on this side or that side, the other side is going to view you as the worst of that side. And it's just, I don't know, man. There's a lot of people in the middle that aren't as, and I think that's the majority, and they're not as crazy as everyone thinks.
Some of us are crazy brown-haired socialists. But for those of you who are new here, hello, I am Shoe0nhead. If you ask the right wing, I am Stalin. If you ask the left wing, I am Hitler. Fiscally far left, culturally centrist, socially retarded. But if you really must put me in a box, it's not that hard to pin me down. I'm a populist. Think Huey Long if he was a 5'3" Italian New Yorker woman who still did her hair and makeup like it was 2008. Put a pin in that Huey Long name, by the way. He's gonna come up later. I grew up in the 90s and the 2000s. My political awakening was jibjab.com. The first time I voted for Obama. I was ready for that hope and change. Instead, we got the crushing of Occupy Wall Street and more drone strikes. And from there, it only got worse. I voted for Bernie in the primaries in 2016, and I watched as the Democratic Party did everything in their power to destroy this man twice. So it is safe to say I am a little biased when it comes to the Democratic Party, but I don't think I've hated them more than I do right now. The truth is, my last video was way meaner and way harsher than the final product turned out to be. When I showed the video to my assistant, he basically had an intervention with me and he was like, listen, you need to soften this up a bit. It's a few days before the election. You went too hard. Well,
take your stance. Take a stand for something or fall for anything. I don't agree with safe opinions. I don't agree with comfortable perspectives. It's okay to believe in something. Now, whether immoral is indicative of where your belief may carry you as much as it may be analyzed. Because if you're going to put something out there, you must be prepared for criticism and analysis of others. And it's normal. It's okay to have these kind of conversations. But I don't agree with any kind of safety in reference to people's personal opinions and freedom of speech. I think the only rule is articulate yourself well. Ensure that the message and perception is as aligned as possible.
The election is over. And I'm sorry, River, but I'm going hard. You idiots. You morons. You imbeciles. Kamala Harris? Really? That's who you threw up there? The one who dropped out before Iowa? The one who got blown the f*** out by Tulsi Gabbard? Why didn't you hold a primary? Aren't you the f***ing saviors of democracy? Where the f*** was the democracy? Oh, true. Big congratulations to Tim Walz on being the first white male DEI hire. It didn't f***ing work. The DNC completely neutered that f***ing guy, reduced him to this weird token white man. Hello, fellow men, I too play football. But hey, men weren't the only demographic you completely dropped the ball with. Trump made incredible gains with women, too. Oh, and all those never Trumpers you tried to court, the people who like the old respectable GOP. You know, the old respectable GOP that led us into a pointless war that cost us trillions of dollars and millions of lives. But we're at least nice on Twitter. That GOP. Yeah, they didn't come out and vote for your ass either. So you got Liz Cheney to tag along for what? For f***ing what? You raised $1 billion and ended up $20 million in debt? Where the hell did all that money go? Maybe you should have blown it all on celebrity appearances that did nothing. Or maybe it was spending 6 figures on a single-use set.
One of the biggest issues too was she was anointed. That's not part of our politics, to be anointed. Correct me if I'm wrong. But she was anointed as a candidate. I get it. She was already in the vice presidency. Let me know what you think.
For the Call Her Daddy podcast that didn't even hit 1 million views. I want to see a full audit of this campaign, because I wouldn't be surprised if this was all like a big money laundering scheme, because honestly, that makes more sense than this being a legitimate presidential campaign. Then, they had the audacity to beg their supporters for money after she lost. How about you? How about every DNC consultant should have this map sewn onto the inside of their eyelids? May they never have a peaceful wink of sleep for the rest of their miserable lives. So that is how I feel about the whole situation. But what do Democrats and the media think? What do they think the Harris campaign did wrong?
Externalized blame. Let's get into it though.
Why do they think Kamala lost?
I think Harris ran a really good campaign. If there's one person I do not blame for this loss, it is Vice President Harris.
Let me pander this group and then let me orient the blame towards something that isn't that group. And it's just, I feel like this video is just going to be a nice, good cup of repetition from the previous video. And it's never ending, right?
This is gonna be a long fucking video.
The media this morning saying Dems need to have a reckoning. No, we don't. We can't be blamed because we expected Americans to be who they always claim they are. Democrats don't have a messaging problem. America has a racism problem. Kamala ran a flawless campaign in 100 days, and I refuse to let y'all gaslight me into believing anything other than that. She lost because she's a woman, and a black one at that.
I mean, this really was an historic, flawlessly run campaign.
Listen, I'm no political analyst, but losing seems like a pretty big flaw.
Truly, don't overthink it. It's because she's a woman, she's a black woman.
Don't overthink it. In fact, don't think about it at all.
And Kamala Harris lived up to our dreams.
Why are we dismantling her Indian heritage? Why does that not matter? I feel like Indian heritage is very rich as a culture. Why are we making it... I get it. I understand why. Using these as frames of blame and victimhood is just the inadequacy of these people. I feel like when people live in a sense of victim mentality, it's naturally that they're going to use these terms to draw out the pity and guilt, like we spoke before. And then it's still something I don't like to see, I guess was one way to look at it.
Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. She ran a remarkable 107-day emergency campaign full of joy and hope.
Kamala Harris was the perfect candidate, and she ran a beautiful campaign of joy, empathy, and unity. Joy and empathy and unity doesn't motivate people to go to the polls. No wonder Republicans had incredible turnout and so many Democrats stayed home. This isn't Steven's universe. You just can't
And those terms don't really apply when they're appealing to guilt and shame in people and bashing people's character. Where's the unity in that?
joy and empathy and unity your way out of not being able to afford food for your family.
CNN has a story titled, Where the Harris Campaign Went Wrong. Nope, I won't read it. Harris ran a great campaign. The story should be titled, Where the American People Went Wrong.
La la la, I can't hear you. La 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 la, I can't hear you. It's not me, it's you. La 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 la. The cope is unreal here. They don't even want to listen
Ain't that exactly what we said in the last one?
to criticism. They really think they did absolutely nothing wrong. They only see this as a Trump win and not a Democrat failure.
Kamala Harris was not a flawed candidate. America is a flawed country. This incredible tweet here is from Shannon Watts, who is on the board of Emerge America, which is an organization that, quote, shows Democratic women how to run for office. Yeah, we're never getting a female president.
Joe Biden's been a phenomenal president. He's lived up to so many of the promises he's made. There's one promise left that he could fulfill, being a transitional figure. He could resign the presidency in the next 30 days, make Kamala Harris the president of the United States.
Whoa.
He would absolve her.
Wow. What the f*** is this Make-A-Wish president shit? Like she's a little kid who wants to play pretend. Oh, just let her for...
To be fair, I completely disagree with that sentiment. I don't think that's right to do at all. The people didn't vote for her. She just lost this election. So to do that is basically to spit in the face of the people for essentially the biggest participation trophy that you could possibly give somebody. People will support who they want to support, and this isn't someone that they predominantly supported.
For a few days. What? Please tell me we're not going to get the first female president out of pity.
Well done, America.
Yeah,
you failed them both.
The people cannot let...
Which makes perfect sense because that's essentially what they've been trying to appeal to this whole time is pity, shame, and
politicians
guilt.
Down. That's not how this works. As a politician, you are not owed anyone's vote. You have to earn it, and evidently she didn't earn it. We already went through this in 2016. Donald Trump beat both female candidates. Donald iron sealing Trump. It's not our fault the female candidates you're putting up are dog shit. Give us some good female candidates and maybe people will vote for them. At this rate, the first female president
Tulsi Gabbard
is going to be a Republican. Mark my words, it's bound to happen. And if it doesn't happen, this was a joke. One of the groups that showed up overwhelmingly for Trump was Latinos. One of the major stories of the results is the significant surge in support for Trump among Latino voters. Trump nearly erased the Democratic advantage in this group, narrowing the gap from 33 points to just 8. Democrats gonna build the wall 50 times higher after that one. We have to have a very, very uncomfortable conversation about Latino voters in this country. Me watching him deport the Latinos and the Arab Americans after they voted for him. And Cinco de Mayo.
To all you Latinos that voted for Trump, I hope he mass deports you and your entire family.
No wonder.
Whether you were here legally or not, you gotta go.
I know for a fact that most Latinos for Trump have undocumented family members. So if you know of a Latino who voted for Trump, I urge you to call this number and report said family members.
Donald Trump's strongest soldiers. Spiteful liberals.
A district that's 97% Latino went 75 percentage points for Donald Trump. Why?
Misogyny.
It's on the border.
It's
the border
misogyny.
crisis is on their doorstep. And they were begging people to care about it for years. We need to take some less.
That's what that was.
Another demographic for people that overwhelmingly showed up to vote against Kamala were Muslims. In a Michigan-specific poll of 502 registered Muslim voters, Stein got 59% support, followed by Trump at 22%, and Harris with a tiny 14% of the vote. The results show significant backlash to the Biden administration's handling of Israel's brutal war in Gaza, which has killed at least 43,508 Palestinians, including more than 16,765 children, as well as how the Harris campaign chose to tackle the issue. So how exactly did they tackle that issue? Why, sending that old pervert freak Bill Clinton up to Michigan to talk down to Muslims about Palestine.
I understand why young Palestinian and Arab Americans in Michigan think too many people have died. I get that. But
Muslims really said, we hate you more than the guy that talked about a Muslim ban. Just a side note, look at this fucking guy. It's like he hasn't had his daily dose of adrenochrome in a week. Someone get this man a fresh child stat. Muslims, Latinos, who else are we gonna blame? Ah yes, women. Yes, Trump improved with young men, but he drew in young women too.
Wow, look at that. 52% of all women who look like me are f***ing stupid.
Despite making abortion the #1 issue in her
Just keep it going.
Campaign, despite Brat Summer, despite the White Women for Harris Zoom calls, and most of all, despite the Taylor Swift endorsement, Harris only managed to get +8 with women. Despite it all, many women came out to support Trump, especially Gen Z women. In 2020, 30% of young women voted for Trump. In 2024, 40% of young women voted for Trump. In fact, so many women voted for him that women on TikTok started wearing blue bracelets to signal to other women that they were one of the good ones who didn't vote for Trump.
Swifties, I'm buying as many blue beads and blue hearts as I can, and I'm gonna make bracelets so we know who we can trust.
Yeah. Anyway, some young women in response to Trump's victory are starting to get into the 4B movement. A movement started in South Korea. Basically, MGTOW for women. Women giving up on dating men, having sex with men, having babies, marriage, whatever.
We are taking coochie off the table indefinitely.
Cancel all future plans with men. 4B is where it's at. Use their own stupid traditional views against them. Say that you don't want sex before marriage. Say that you are waiting for the right man. They will be seething because they are sexually dependent on women who they call sluts. See, this is the best angle. No sex before marriage. Give them what they voted for. So conservatives won the election and women are threatening to not sleep around. It kind of seems like the conservatives won a little more than just the election. I might do a whole video on the 4B movement. Tell me if you're interested in that. I don't know. Anyway, young men did come out and support
We'll see if we want to watch it or not.
Trump, and apparently for the reasons I and many others.
My opinion on the 4B movement is that you really helped current relationships to exist. Because if you're that radical of a woman, and we know that they're not holding themselves away from that for the sake of altruism. We know that. And if we don't know that, let's go ahead and assess and analyze why that is. But in my perspective, I think by removing radical women off the table, or what is perceived as radical women, considering how much they allow the political identity to be their own identity, which is obviously a sign of immaturity because we need to be more of us than we allow the world to be a part of us, right? And with that, we kind of helped better relationships to exist, because if they're taking themselves off the table, it's highly likely that men that are maturing and men that want to seek maturity probably shouldn't end up with these women anyways. So kind of a good thing on the side of men, and it's also kind of a good thing on the side of conservative women, because there's more men to choose from now. Let me know your thoughts.
Predicted. We asked young men why they voted for Donald Trump. Here's what they said. Nick Sumners, a 21-year-old cosmetic car repairman from Virginia, says he is pro-choice, but when he voted in the 2024 presidential election, he did so for Donald Trump. Despite his personal beliefs, he says that Trump talks about the American people in a way that resonates with him, without, in his opinion, faulting him for his gender and sexual orientation. I'm a straight white man, and I feel like we take the blame for a lot of things. Of course there are bad guys, he adds, insisting that he's not one of them just because he voted for Trump, but what appealed to him about Donald Trump was that his campaign was not coming after us. He was highlighting the American people, which we are. It doesn't matter what color you are, what you may identify as. Since I wasn't excluded, I resonated with it. When you tell a young white guy, hey, you're an oppressor, and because you're white, you have privileges that your black and Hispanic peers didn't have, and you're inherently at fault, or you're guilty for that, which is what a lot of the left wings or Democrats are saying. We're not racist, we're not misogynistic, we're just normal people, and we are friends with everyone. We're tired of hearing a lot of this BS from a lot on the far left. I feel like there's this cultural frustration that young men have that they're not allowed to be young men. I hope the male loneliness epidemic eats you MAGA scum alive. I hope you feel a hole in your soul and feel unloved until your dying day. I hope you rot in your deathbed, wondering why women looked at you like you had rabies your whole life as your eyes closed for the last time. Unfortunately, the all men suck branding just isn't good for getting men to ally with you.
Oh no, it can't be! Is that the consequences of my own actions?
Yes, the reasonable and rational men know you aren't talking about them, but maybe it's time to realize that most men aren't reasonable and rational. How do you speak to young men when they're literally Nazis? Why are Gen Z males the f***ing Hitler youth?
How do we get young men to get on board with the young men eat shit and die movement? Hear me out. Maybe not calling them Hitler Youth? After the election, a YouTuber I am subscribed to uploaded a video called How the Right is Winning Young Men, and I was excited to see his take. But then it comes time to talk about men's issues, And this is how he did it.
But this is the part where I want to enter the male loneliness epidemic. I know. We're all tired of hearing.
The entire idea of the male loneliness epidemic is it's this idea that really centers men and men's feelings. The premise is of quite a flawed premise to begin with.
I agree. I also, I have such mixed feelings about this. I do. Unpopular though it is on the left to like give grace to the male loneliness epidemic. I have mixed feelings about it. I'm picking my words carefully so the leftists don't murder me. Like, don't rake me over the coals for this. But I think that I understand as much as I can understand a heterosexual man.
Yeah, I think we found the answer to the video title.
I'm not going to venture further into that person's content to find the full context. And obviously, if there's more to it, please feel free to tell me in the comments, by all means. But I think that was a perfect example of some of the stuff we're talking about. How is that supposed to reach anybody? It's too apologetic. You're avoiding the essence of being sincere by apologizing to everything that isn't the group that you're trying to discuss. And it's actually a bit of a paradox, really. The paradox that you're seeing is if the left is supposed to be more agreeable or have elements of agreeableness, in essence, of empathy and feeling and appealing to involvement and inclusion, why cast away various groups? And I think that what you're seeing is displacement of ego and superiority complexes. And typically what that'll induce is basically if we are these group of people and we get into these mob mentalities, especially because of online entities and victimized identities, then we are going to see us as more and not see you as people at all. So we do not feel bad about the ridicule or insult or the stones we may cast upon you because we don't even see you as people. Typically, they're empathic in the sense that they will find essences of belonging to be more important. Sure. But if they don't view you as people, that empathy doesn't apply to you. And I think that that's kind of what you're seeing. And what immaturity will typically dictate is that we don't know how to aim the mature variations of ourselves whatsoever because we're more obsessed with power and narcissism than we are with being the true vision of whatever the hell we're speaking, because it's so much harder to be and far easier to say. And we got people like this that exist in this sphere. No wonder, yet again. And it was very similar to the previous video where the idea that the right's radicalization is existing in spheres of development that's obviously lost on me as well. And I think that what you're seeing amongst the spheres that are trying to be appealing to men for the political purpose is why they're not impressive. And I think that if you really want to address why you can't reach people, I suggest you get some downtime and buy yourself a mirror and then go ahead and run down that list as to why.
Oh, I have to pick my words carefully so my own movement doesn't attack me for caring about men's issues. You see the issue? If you can't talk about this without having to walk on eggshells in fear of your own allies ripping your head off, maybe that is part of the reason men are moving right. Also, I feel like this is really important to say. I don't think all these men are moving right. I think just a lot of them hate the Democratic Party and feel alienated from the left. So what was the overwhelming takeaway from the Democrats and the left? To actually start listening to men? No, of course not. Instead, their solution once again seems to be we need a liberal Joe Rogan. We need a liberal Joe Rogan, ASAP. We need a left-wing Rogan. Democrats are gonna keep losing until they have their own Joe Rogan, their own Elon Musk, until they create their own alternative to Fox News. People saying Harris should have done Joe Rogan are missing the point. That wouldn't have helped her. Liberals need to build their own Joe Rogan. Oh my god, we need a liberal Joe Rogan. You had a liberal Joe Rogan. His name was Joe Rogan. But he was too edgy, too problematic, said too many no-no.
You're not going to have these equivocal people. You're not. The reason why you're not going to have these equivocal people is because how radical the movement is and how much the barrier for entry is. You're never going to have equivocal character to match these other personalities because you're not going to have someone with the character of Joe Rogan who is of equal character, but is submissive and in this far left sphere. It's not going to happen. You actually have to be ambitious. You have to be powerful in your own right. And you also have to be mature to be able to be these characters. So do they exist in the Democratic sphere? Yes, they did. But because they didn't shift into what the radicalization is, they're now excluded because of how far gone that side is going. And like I said, it's a bottomless pit. It's going to keep going. You think it's done. It's not done. It's going to keep going. And you basically alienated the left into two sides, and you split and divided it into this extreme and non-extreme. And naturally, you're going to push people out that way. And you originally had a lot of these people of character that were on the Democratic side, and then it degraded. It regressed. The idea that when we focus too much on what the far left is doing is that we're hyper focusing on a very, very small amount of people. It's not a small amount. You look at broad senses of media, you look at the places like The View, where everything that isn't what they think is considered misogynistic, sexist, racist, whatever. So anything you do that's not in line of their value or whatever they see, you're blamed, insulted, and treated as less. That's not the small minority, all right? These people are preaching to a broad and big audience. It's not hyper-focusing onto those one or two people on Twitter or what have you. This is what half of that political party thinks. That's not one or two people. That's not a couple of bad actors. That's thousands of people who have zero senses of responsibility and are more inclined to attack anything that doesn't believe in what they believe. Now, you don't see that kind of divide on the right. Do you see various forms of bad actors on that side too? Yeah, obviously. But they're not as separate, because the concept that everyone on the right is racist is very conflicting and contradicting when all you see is race words on the left, because they're black, because they're white, because they're Hispanic, because there's so much divide in the narrative. I feel like, how are we going to use terms like racist, but then it's the only party that blames things in this light? It's crazy to me. And then you see it just more and more often.
Words talk to too many no-no people about no-no topics, and in 2020, when Bernie Sanders went on his podcast and Joe endorsed him, the Democrat journalist class freaked the out and smeared him for weeks. The left can't have a Joe Rogan, because everything that makes Joe Rogan, is not allowed on the left.
Kamala Harris ditched Joe Rogan podcast interview over progressive backlash fears.
So Joe Rogan was too problematic? But Liz Cheney was fine? Listen, you don't need a leftist Joe Rogan or liberal Joe Rogan. You just need leftists and liberals to go on Joe Rogan. And that means not giving a shit about being canceled by your own movement.
Look, you can have an argument with Rogan, agree with him, disagree with him, but what's the problem going on those shows? I got vilified by some of the Democratic establishment because I went on Rogan's show. Now a lot of other people are doing just that.
Anyways, liberals should start doing podcasts and TikToks and whatever aimed at setting the youth straight.
Ah yes, there's nothing the youth enjoy more than being set straight.
We don't have the equivalent of Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson to move that man in a feminist direction. By the way, we should educate men that it's actually really great to live with a strong woman who makes money. It's actually...
You're not going to find a Jordan Peterson on the left, because where the left is going, orienting self as the locus of responsibility, isn't really part of the narrative. It's a bunch of people blaming everyone for what is currently happening, a bunch of name calling, a bunch of obviously surface level insults. Someone of a mature concept as wanting to work on self, maybe you guys can kind of pitch in a little bit too, is how is that going to exist on what the far left is currently doing, when all it's about is eating each other alive and blaming everybody for everything? I feel like you already have a lot of spokespeople on the far left, and these are the people that are pointing fingers at everyone and trying to make sense of who they're pointing fingers at. And no one's really talking about that conversation. You heard me talk about it in the previous video, that they're just not doing something that's impressive to people that are maturing themselves and people that are pursuing something more than them. And you're not going to find it on that side, because that's not part of entry, right? That's not part of being involved with that political party. It's degraded. It's regressed. There's no other term to use than it is now becoming completely hostile to anything that is not in lieu of it.
Easier. Life is easier.
We're going to be under Republican rule for the next 100 years, aren't we?
Trump's win leaves Democrats asking, where are our bro whisperers? We have to make entertaining, engaging content that men want to watch and care about. Then, over time, you pepper in more progressive views.
So you want to start a normal podcast and then start sprinkling in propaganda? Should you even be saying this out loud?
Dems need to seriously put all their money into...
It's kind of what I said last time about the whole AOC. Just trying to change the narrative into something that is appealing without being the person that is appealing, and that's not going to work.
Creating propaganda network to compete with the right's massive amount of propaganda. Democrats need their own propaganda machine, and I'm not even joking a little bit.
First of all, again, I don't think we need better propaganda is something you should be saying out loud. Second of all, Democrats already have that, and have had it for decades. It's called Hollywood. It's called every celebrity, every institution, every piece of media, from movies to video games. Every celebrity from Beyonce to Taylor Swift endorsed her. She had Cardi B at all her rallies. She got the f***ing Avengers together.
Hi, you guys. Hi, Avengers.
Hey, Scarlett. Wow, Trump is literally Thanos. By the way, with all these journalists and people talking about how we need a liberal Andrew Tate, a liberal Joe Rogan, yeah, be prepared to see some of the most forced, overproduced, astroturfed streamers and YouTubers to pop up overnight and subtly
and have a narrative that makes no damn sense because the person that's saying it doesn't actually believe in any of it, and it just looks like a script from a movie that you don't really relate to.
Or not so subtly start shilling for the Democratic Party. You're gonna start seeing funded DNC plants all over YouTube, Twitch, TikTok, because they really do think the answer to all of this is more podcasts. All the funding in the world won't buy you an audience. You could have $1 million set and the best sound and video equipment ever, but it will not buy you a large and dedicated audience. I've been using a Mac laptop webcam and a shitty snowball mic for over 10 years, and you idiots keep coming back for some reason. And listen, it's 2024. Y'all have a camera and a microphone. Be the liberal Joe Rogan you want to see in the world. But the thing is, if people can hear your opinions when they turn on the TV, they're not gonna watch your shit. People tune into alt media to hear alt opinions. Even the most popular leftist streamers, like Hassan, for example, spend a lot of time criticizing the Democratic Party. So it's gonna be hard to build some kind of Democrat shill Joe Rogan. But I can't wait to see you try. After the election, one of the only politicians I've seen who is actively trying to understand why people voted the way that they did is AOC. When I met her, I whispered into her ear, "Take the pronouns out of your bio." And she did. My influence. Anyway, after the election, AOC found out that a ton of people voted for her down ballot, but also voted for Trump for president on the same ticket. Curious, she took to her Instagram to ask people why they did that. And these were some of their answers.
I feel like Trump and you are both real. It's real simple. Trump and you care for the working class. But also you signified change. Trump signified change. I've said lately, Trump sounds more like you. Loved ones say you're both straightforward in challenging corruption and broken government. Because it's different than what has been the last 4 years. Something had to go. I feel that you both are outsiders compared to the rest of DC and less establishment. Voted Trump, but I like you and Bernie. I don't trust either party establishment politicians.
The replies, of course, were full of people like, these idiots.
Based off what she put forth.
These morons, these fools.
Most depressing shit I've ever seen. These people sound dumb as hell. Such staggering ignorance and stupidity. The median voter. I hate the median voter. I want to destroy the median voter. Why is the median voter this stupid? I hate the median voter. How could this be real? Americans really are the dumbest gentlemen on earth. This is giving me a headache. I don't understand the median voter.
Listen, it's really not that hard to understand. It's populism, honey. It's why when I went to January 6th and told a bunch of boomers I was a Bernie supporter, a ton of them reacted like this.
I think he's one of the few honest people I think he's honest. He beat Hillary Clinton, and he would have beat Joe Biden, too.
People hate empty suits that sound like they're constantly reading from a script.
That's
they want
fair,
someone
right?
who tells it like it is. Someone who fights for the everyman, or at least sounds like they do.
How are you feeling about Trump's upcoming presidency, Trump 2?
I voted for him.
Oh, you like AOC?
Yeah.
Did you vote for her?
Yeah. Remember one thing about why people voted for Trump. They want change.
The average American voter despises the establishment and will vote for anyone who promises to destroy it. And the fact that none of you understand this is a big reason why you lost and will continue to lose.
I think people saw an extreme happening within the country and they wanted an extreme to fix it because they didn't want more of the same. When you know that there's catastrophic issues constantly brewing and you're already with an organization that is contributing to it and not necessarily providing the answers or fixing the issues as they come across, they're going to naturally want someone who looks like a difference. And I think that's where the term change kind of comes into play, is that we want something that's going to do more, or at least something different, because where we're at, where we're going isn't good. We need something different. And I think that Trump was a perfect example of something just completely out of the blue and is just going to bring stuff back on track at a minimum. And I think that's what people believed in. They're like, look how bad things are getting. We need something that is as extreme as what is happening. And yeah.
Until you do understand it. Capiche? The beatings will continue until the populism improves. How could people have voted for this felon? How could they vote for Trump, especially after January 6th, where he led a bunch of his supporters to destroy that beautiful, shining beacon of hope? Well, first of all, you have to understand that that's not a shining beacon of hope to most people. That is a dirty, disgusting brothel that sold out the future of their children and will probably send them into the next world war. After all the indictments, the mugshots, the committees, the documentaries, people clearly don't care about January 6th. And that might scare some people, but...
And there's also some kind of interesting stuff about January 6th involving the FBI and how they may or may not have instigated certain things. There is a lot of footage out there. There is a lot of verbiage and dialogue out there. So it's interesting to hear both sides, because obviously you have one side that says it was completely incited, but then you have another side that provides proof of FBI instigating people into doing more, as well as having bad actors amongst the crowd, riling people up a little more. And it's like, it's interesting what a full perspective can look like.
The truth is, a politician that promises safety and affordable food can do 100 January 6s. It's kind of like FDR said.
Democracy has disappeared in several other great nations, not because the people of those nations dislike democracy, but because they had grown tired of unemployment and insecurity, of seeing their children hungry while they sat helpless in the face of government confusion and government weakness through lack of leadership. Finally, in desperation, they chose to sacrifice liberty in hope of getting something to eat.
Speaking of FDR, let's talk a little bit about the guy that FDR stole a bunch of his ideas from, shall we? Someone who the modern Democratic Party should probably try and learn from. That's right, I finally found an excuse to talk about my favorite politician. The man, the myth, the legend, the kingfish himself, Huey Long. Huey Long was the 40th governor of Louisiana from 1928 to 1932. He was a populist member of the Democratic Party and rose to national prominence during the Great Depression. He took on big oil and Wall Street and drastically helped lift Louisiana out of poverty. Long had many supporters and haters, and to this day is celebrated as a populist champion of the people, and at the same time, denounced as a fascist demagogue. To give you a better idea of who Huey was, here are some quotes from the man himself.
Corrupted by wealth and power, your government is like a restaurant with only one dish. They've got a set of Republican waiters on one side and a set of Democratic waiters on the other. But no matter which set of waiters brings you the dish, the legislative grub is all prepared in the same Wall Street kitchen. The only difference I ever found between the Democratic leadership and the Republican leadership is that one of them is skinning you from the ankle up and the other from the ear down.
But Huey Long wasn't some enlightened centrist, no. The man firmly had a side, and that side was the people.
I'm for the poor man. All poor men. Black and white. They all gotta have a chance. They gotta have a home, a job, a decent education for their children. Every man a king. That's my slogan.
When asked if he cared about the bad press he got, Huey replied, "All I care about is what the boys at the forks of the creek think of me." And when Big Oil threatened to leave Louisiana, he said, "If they gotta leave, they can go to hell and stay there." They don't make politicians like this anymore.
It's harder to look on historical figures for one reason only, is the lack of the ability to monitor and observe these people doesn't shine light on their shadows as they exist. So it's easy to highlight person's character if we want to see them highlighted in good ways. And it's easy to do the same on the opposite side. But we got to keep in mind that anyone before current technology, or at least for the past 30 years or so, we weren't able to communicate a lot of the same things in the past. And I think that that's one of the curious things that I've always had, is tracking previous historical figures throughout history and looking at different accounts of their history, because a lot of these people that are in history books are either more evil or far better than how we perceive them in different lights. And I think that that's one of obviously the detriments that I think about whenever I think about historical figures, is I wonder what they would be like, obviously, without the taint of current society and as they existed today. And if every truth did come out, what would that look like, you know?
Politicians used to be like mob bosses. Now they go on Call Her Daddy podcasts. Sad. Huey had many powerful enemies, and because of this, he was assassinated in 1935. His last words were allegedly, "God, don't let me die. I have so much to do." There's a lot of talk online right now about how we need a Joe Rogan for the left and Andrew Tate for the left, but there's also talk about how we need a Donald Trump for the left, and well, Huey Long was exactly that. And to be completely honest, I don't think you people could handle a Donald Trump for the left. You couldn't even handle Bernie Sanders. You called him a sexist and a racist and did everything in your power to crush him and keep him down. But unlike Bernie, Huey Long wouldn't just lay down and take it. Huey Long would...
I think the reason why it wouldn't exist too is like they're never going to have a narrative that's safe enough for you. And I think that a lot of these people on far left, they need a safe and comfortable and inclusive narrative. It doesn't exist. You're never going to have a narrative that's for everybody. Simple. It's always going to upset somebody. And if you have a constant concern of the essence of discomfort towards one person or the other, you're never going to be able to be your true self. And that's always going to get in the way in reference to who you can be as a person and what you could say as a person. It's always going to diminish your ability to approach tough concepts or significant obstacles that may exist, especially in a country's path. So that's obviously just my opinion.
Scare the shit out of the modern Democratic Party. But if there's anyone they need to take a lesson from, it's him. Alright, time to get out of this costume. I feel like an old hooer. It should come as no great surprise that the Democratic Party, which has abandoned working class people, would find that the working class had abandoned them. Bernie Sanders said in a statement about the results of Tuesday's election, "While the Democratic leadership defends the status quo, the American people are angry and want change, and they're right. Will the big money interests and well-paid consultants who control the Democratic Party learn any real lessons from this disastrous campaign? Will they understand the pain and political alienation that tens of millions of Americans are experiencing? Do they have any ideas as to how we can take on the increasingly powerful oligarchy which has so much economic power? Probably not. All the groups that Sanders originally courted, young people, Latinos, the working class, are gone. And I don't know if they're coming back. Maybe this is a one-time thing, maybe it's just because of Trump or inflation, or maybe the meme is coming true. Maybe Republicans are the new party of the working class. Democrats' working class exodus sets off reckoning within party. Democrats, who have long prided themselves as the party for the little guy, instead strengthened their emerging base of financially secure college graduates this election, while a growing number of blue-collar voters embraced Trump and Republicans. Especially alarming for Democrats this election, the exodus of working class voters from the Democratic Party included not just white voters, but helped Trump make gains with Latino and black men.
That's actually a common narrative too, is that the Republican Party is the new democracy. And obviously everyone's going to have their pitch in reference to how real or how far gone of a belief that is. I think that there's some truth to it, because if you look at what they address, you look at what they've started to focus on, it sounds a lot like democracy in the 90s. And I don't know, maybe people need to go back in history a little bit, go back in time a little bit to hear some of the talking points in this current administration or this incoming administration. They said a lot of the same stuff. Now, hopefully they follow through with it, and that's all we can hope for. But you're starting to see that more and more and more. And that's why even when she went to voters and she mentioned Bernie, they were kind of okay with it, because it's like, yeah, here I am, this middle-class American. I just want to do better, and I want a government that's going to help me do better in some way, shape, or form.
This realignment crystallized a political reality that is tough for Democrats to swallow. With blue-collar voters flocking away from their party over multiple election cycles, Democrats' refashioned base is becoming more upper-class, urban, suburban, and coastal. It's a narrowed coalition that does not bode well for future elections. To put things into perspective, the Trump coalition is closer to the Obama coalition than the Harris one is. That is crazy. That is wild. That is what we call a potential party switch. And I don't really care about how many leftists or Democrats cope about this. We have better union policies, we have better wages policy. Yeah, that might be true, and I agree, but we don't get to decide who the party of the working class is. The working class does. And if exit polls are anything to go by, basic left-wing economic policy is still incredibly popular. People just hate the Democratic Party. White men without college degrees are going to ruin this country. First of all, white men without college degrees built this country, bitch. Second of all, this is apparently a real Democratic Party strategist saying this. You want to know how to win 2028? Step 1. Stop listening to freaks like this. The election, if having a degree was a requirement to vote. And this is what the election would look like if everyone was allowed to vote. Oh wait. That's this election. I too hate democracy.
And I think Bernie Sanders is wrong. I think the more relevant question actually is, what is wrong with America?
Democrats have a smug problem. The day after the election, an NBC News chart circulated on Instagram that highlighting exit poll data showing that the more education you had, the more likely you would vote for Vice President Kamala Harris over President-elect Donald Trump. Some liberals used the occasion to look down upon the icky dummies who were too stupid to know they shouldn't vote for Trump. Yet Trump's victory was both definitive and diverse. He won broad swaths of the electorate, making significant gains in New York and California and winning over larger percentages of Latino voters and young voters than in 2020. He also won a majority of first-time voters. Large factions of the left condescendingly believe that dumb people are the reason Trump won in 2016 and won again in 2024. And that patronizing, visceral vibe is obvious. It's a massive turnoff to many other voters. It is a mountain smug Democrats have to overcome if they want to reconnect with voters.
Kind of like what I said before. Sorry for the reiteration. If it gets annoying, I apologize. No association, IQ, and morality. You cannot use the securing of degrees or educational paths as your moral high ground. It doesn't exist. Yet again, there's often a hypothesis of college tenure and political indoctrination. It's very likely. And there's a lot of information, although it isn't proven through statistical research. There's various amounts of analyses that arrive to the same conclusion. I think all someone has to do is collect up the data and make it research at this point. And it's something that we really have to pay attention to. Just because you went to college, it doesn't make you better in the sense of what you think is better for the country, because everyone can read the same things and everyone has access to the same variations of media. All they have to do is interpret what that means to them, and is this going to alleviate their life or not? And then they make the distinction. I think that there's a lot of historical Democratic voters that feel the need to vote blue for the sake of voting blue, and which it's very contradicting because you saw a lot of posts of country over party, even though what's happening? It was definitely party over country, and it was definitely vote blue. And if you don't vote blue, then there's something wrong with you. And that sounds like you're choosing party over country. And obviously there's essentially this very hostile presence towards the outcome of the election. It's just like, okay, this decision was made. And you kind of saw it in 2020 on the opposite side too. Now, various beliefs are circling the 2020 election. But the point is that this is the decision. Move on. Figure something out. Do something more. And it just sucks that we see this amongst our own people.
Once, the coastal liberal establishment had an air of open-mindedness, but now these elites have evolved into the provincial, narrow-minded scolds they once critiqued.
It's not very intelligent when you're so narrow-minded, right? I think that's one of the key points to remember as well. It's like, oh, you don't have a degree, you're stupid. And it's like, okay, that doesn't sound like intelligence to me. And it doesn't sound any essence of wisdom. And I think that that's kind of what you're seeing, is that you can have a high IQ and not be wise. And I think that's kind of lost on people too.
All their education has narrowed their worldview. Their credentialism has built themselves a bubble in which to hide from reality.
The contempt many liberals and some leftists have for the working class has never been more on display than it is right now. Even coming from some leftist YouTubers I watch that I know better and spend a lot of their time trying to bring people to the left. Your college degree does not make you any smarter than a working class person without a college degree. And more importantly, don't talk down to a vast majority of the population.
They're tying the college degree to their intelligence, and that's what the distinction is, and that's what they're using as their little weapon. Is like, here, I have this degree. This means I have greater intelligence. Here's my certificate of intelligence. And that's not exactly how it pans out.
Because despite how badly you want to believe it, they are not stupid. They are the people who grow your food, build your houses, pave your roads, fix the plumbing in your luxury apartments. And guess what? There are more of them than they are of you. So maybe you people should start listening to them instead of wagging your finger in their faces as if disagreeing with you is some moral failing, because it's not. These people aren't all racists and Nazis or whatever. They are normal people. They are the proletariat. They're who you should be fighting for. And they don't believe you are fighting for them. More importantly, there is a difference between being educated and being smart. IQ isn't just about how many books you've read or how many words you know. A lot of it is about pattern recognition, and boy, did I recognize some patterns here. Maybe you guys should have listened to the bimbo with populist brain rot, because she seemed to be right about a lot of this. If the Democratic Party wants to win another election, they need to start understanding the importance of populism. Drop the divisive identity politics and focus on the bread and butter issues, or you are doomed. Become the party of Huey Long again, or you are doomed. But you know what? Maybe you're not doomed. Because if Trump fails to deliver on his promises, or we get like George Bush 3, it's totally possible that the populism vacuum will be open again. Will the Democrats take advantage of this and actually put up a good candidate? No. They're gonna put up like Pete Buttigieg or Gavin Newsom, and the populism vacuum will be filled by people like my Twitter mutual and soon-to-be Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance. That is still so weird. What do I do with this power? Hey, JD, best buddy, I have an idea. It's called Patriot Care, and it's healthcare, but our tax dollars go to it instead of bombs. Doesn't that sound cool? If you can't beat 'em, join 'em. The fact is, this election was a complete rejection of the liberal ideology. Or it was just because of inflation and people want to afford eggs again. Yeah, it was probably that. It just kind of sucks to see the party you voted for your whole life, the party you grew up with, just get worse and worse over time. After this, the Democrats are gonna move right in the dumbest ways. They're gonna become like the new neocons, but gay.
I mean, you can't have sunk cost fallacy in the realm of politics. If it's not what it used to be, then move on.
And I have no idea how a second Trump term is gonna go. I hope it goes well. I don't know. Congrats to
That's all you can hope for.
RFK, I guess. I'll see you guys in the Adderall labor camps. Otherwise known as the concentration camps. Get it? Okay. Anyway, so that is enough of my yapping. Now I want to hear you yap. Why do you think Trump won? And what could the Democrats do to win 2028? Anyway, if you liked this video, please consider subscribing. Also, if you can, donate to me on Patreon, or you could do a little tip with the little tip jar down below somewhere. It helps the channel a lot, and I appreciate it so much. And I will see you very soon with a new video that is very, very different than this one. Some of you might like it. I know a certain community will. But that is it for now, so bye!
So that was Shoe0nhead's latest video, Fall of the Democrats. Now, she ended up yet again with another question. Why did Trump win? I feel like we kind of answered a little bit of this as the video went on, but I think the overarching point is they wanted an extreme to match the current extremes being addressed and being faced within the United States. And then in addition to that, he was unapologetically himself. I feel like people knew what they were getting because of how much he puts himself out there. And there's a sense of safety around that. I feel like there's not in a sense of, oh, he's going to take care of us. But it's in a sense of you're confident in your decision because you see more of a person. And then seeing all the legal cases get dropped for whatever reason, it's like, was this politics? Was this just an attack on his character to try to get him out of the picture, considering that you had better candidates to be placed in that slot over Kamala Harris? And then the idea that she ran a perfect campaign. Come on now. All right. So I think that's the brass tacks of why he was selected, because he spoke to the people to the Americans that are suffering, that essentially this previous term caused. One concept that I would like to discuss and what you're kind of seeing is like it's the end of wokeness. I feel like that's the thing that you're kind of hearing a lot more because it's not as pronounced and it's not getting as much traction as it used to. But to be brief, woke was never really a bad thing. It was essentially to be more politically and nationally aware of the things happening in your country. And that's all it really was, right? Is to be informed through personal variations of research and finding out more. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, the issue is that it got weaponized. And what you're seeing is now the essence of extreme inclusion, which is not the same as being aware. And in this extreme inclusion, you're going to have variations of radicalism exist and procreate in this extreme inclusion, because this is where you're going to develop various counterintuitive arguments and debates and stances that aren't going to be in line with America as a whole, and it's only going to be perceived by those involved. And I think that that's kind of what you're seeing. And one of the psychological components and one of the cognitive discourses that you're seeing in politics lately is victimhood and victim mentality. You see it across the entirety of platforms where the blame game is happening. And I feel like we don't understand how bad or how a lot of immaturity and psychopathy contributes to victim-like identities and personalities. And if the agreeable left typically have more empathy, then they're going to feed into these victim-like personalities and identities. And whenever you have a party that was once whole just eat each other alive over their beliefs and all the finger pointing and all the externalized blame, it's only natural that you're going to see such an outcome exist. And I think that that's exactly what you saw, is that you saw a lot of people that just weren't as extreme as the rest. And they're like, okay, I guess we don't belong here anymore. We just want democracy. And this is starting to sound more like democracy than the other stuff was. And I think that things will continue to get more radicalized the more that the use of technology is involved, because boy, are echo chambers just cultivating the worst things possible. I swear that anonymity of people online is just getting so bad. And you get the craziest concepts, pitches, insults, whatever. And it doesn't help. It doesn't help. You just have a bunch of bad actors saying whatever they want, whenever they want. And it's not in the essence of benevolence, and it's not in the essence of altruism. It's just to tear people down. And they don't realize that it's not going to work that way. And it's just going to get worse. And you're never going to have someone of character exist in that kind of platform, because that requires them to do all these malicious tendencies. And to have someone of character exist in the radical left, that requires that person to, one, be mature, two, speak on the essence of genuine development. And that also means that they also persevered through various struggle and what have you. We got to remember that people who emphasize variations of self-esteem typically keep their audiences in infantile states. And essentially what that means is that when you are consistently focusing on how people feel, you're never allowing them to embrace or expose themselves to entities or variations of self that causes them to grow and develop. Because the whole concept of genuine and authentic ventures is to learn, sacrifice, and improve self upon sacrifice. What you often see is that the greater sense of ourselves is because we sacrifice something. And we reach higher variations of self the more we sacrifice. So that's obviously a positive correlation. The more our character grows, the more we typically have sacrificed. And the orientation towards self-esteem is just focusing on keeping everybody as they are. And a personality like Jordan Peterson existing on the left can't exist, because he's not going to be able to appeal to these people. It's just going to be too triggering, too uncomfortable, too admittance to people's flaws and faults. And that doesn't sound good to someone who wants to hide away within these echo chambers and hide in their shell, right? And continue to be this person that doesn't want to change and doesn't want to develop, or doesn't want to be more, and doesn't want to mature. And I feel like in the essence of immaturity, that's gonna be where we trap ourselves. And it's obviously not going to work. And it's never going to reach people to a grand scale because that's not, yet again, that's not attractive to people wanting to improve. No one likes the blame game. People are over it. People are growing up. People are waking up. We got to move on. And the people trying to spew this same nonsense, you need to grow up and you need to be able to become more. And I guarantee you, you're probably not going to reach the same audience anymore because they're just going to hate you for it. And that's what your life is going to be. So might as well improve so that way the people around you also improve, because when you move and you essentially transcend, then the people around you will either transcend with you or be left behind because you became more. And your growth can often intimidate those that don't want to move, and that's totally normal. And then the last thing is that for those who radicalized themselves and felt it wise to denounce their relationships, you're not a hero and you got some growing up to do. I feel like it's lost on people that it's okay to be able to disagree. Just because you disagree with someone, that doesn't make it a conflict. It doesn't make it a confrontation. Attacks on people makes it a confrontation. You know, when you decide to blame someone for everything, that's a confrontation. But saying, hey, I believe this and you believe that, and it's fine. We're putting forth our own variations of research and we disagree against our points. It's okay. That can exist. This idea that we need to remove ourselves from the space now, how dare they? It's just, why the entitlement? And why is every point such a fragile mark on our own ego? And I think that obviously our egos are just through the roof lately, and we've become very egotistical as a society. And it's definitely something that we need to work on. Goes without saying. So with that being said, thank you to everyone that watched the video. Thank you for everyone that ended up in the comment section of the previous video and pushed me in the direction of this one. Obviously, this one was a little more comical than the last one, and obviously she definitely got after some points. All right, so like the video if you like it. As I mentioned before, if you appreciate the content, consider subscribing. If you dislike the video, then dislike it. Hopefully you'll never see me again, but leave a comment in the comment section down below. What are your aspects on some of the stuff I spoke about as an example? Because I know that I kind of rambled throughout the video and some of you may appreciate it, some of you may not, but go ahead and give me your take on the essence of it and we can hash it out in the comments down below. Thanks again, and I'll go ahead, see you next time.